By the end of this, the Browns won't be able to hide behind explanations anymore. Not behind development timelines. Not behind game plans. Not behind carefully worded press conferences. Because the story was never about one tweet or one play call. It was about patterns. And patterns are what reveal the truth when words stop working. Deion Sanders understood that before anyone else said it out loud. When he wrote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them," it wasn't a slogan. It was a warning. A reminder that behavior, repeated under pressure, is more honest than any narrative pushed through the media. Kevin Stefanski showed who he was in the moments that mattered most. Not when the outcome was safe. Not when the decision could be justified later. But when the game, the crowd, and the spotlight demanded trust. And that's why this debate won't go away quietly. Because Cleveland doesn't just have a quarterback question. It has an identity problem. An organization still caught between control and conviction. Between protecting systems and empowering players. Between fearing influence and embracing talent. Shedeur Sanders didn't ask for any of this. He showed up, did the work, absorbed the criticism, and delivered when the opportunity finally came. He broke franchise droughts. He put his name next to history, and still, the leash never fully loosened. That tells you everything. Browns fans are already choosing sides because they've seen this movie before. A young quarterback flashes hope. The structure around him hesitates. Momentum stalls. And eventually, the blame gets passed until everyone is gone and nothing has changed. The only difference this time is the spotlight. This time, Hall of Famers are watching. Media voices aren't whispering. And a father with nothing left to prove refuses to let the story be rewritten without a fight. Whether Shedeur becomes Cleveland's future or its latest what if remains undecided. But one thing is already clear. The organization has revealed its instincts when control is challenged. And instincts don't lie. The drama isn't slowing down. It's reaching its breaking point. Every snap from here on out will echo far beyond the field. Careers will be shaped. Reputations will stick. And excuses will expire. Because once someone shows you who they are, there's only one thing left to do. Believe them. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay locked in on all the latest NFL drama, make sure you hit that like button. It helps the video reach more people who love this content just like you. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another update, reaction, or storyline as it unfolds in real time. I also want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about Shedeur Sanders' performance and the Browns' collapse? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about it. And don't forget to share this video with friends who follow the NFL. Your support truly keeps the channel moving forward. Rumors began surfacing that hadn't existed days earlier. Unverified stories spread through NFL circles because, suddenly, they didn't sound impossible anymore. Fans started replaying moments they'd brushed off before. Decisions that once seemed questionable now felt intentional. And then came the game that forced everyone to look. A breakout performance, a historic stat line, a stadium ready to explode, and one decision that made people question whether the Browns were trying to win or trying to control something bigger. Through it all, Shedeur Sanders said the right things. Calm, professional, measured. Exactly what a rookie is supposed to be. But his father didn't follow the script. Because this was never just about a tweet. It was never just about one play. And it was never just about development. This was the moment a carefully constructed story cracked, and everything underneath started leaking out. And once that happens, there's no putting it back together. The story the Browns wanted out there was simple, safe, and flattering. According to a well-connected Cleveland insider, Shedeur Sanders wasn't just improving, he was being carefully crafted. The report described a rookie quarterback spending hours inside Kevin Stefanski's office. Daily film sessions, deep conversations about the pro game, a head coach personally investing in a young quarterback's future. It was the kind of development narrative teams love to float when they want to quiet doubt and signal control. On paper, it sounded perfect. a fifth-round rookie learning behind the scenes, a patient coach guiding him along, progress happening the right way, away from the spotlight. But that's exactly why Deion Sanders didn't let it slide. Because to him, that version of events wasn't just exaggerated, it was flat-out false. And instead of issuing a polite correction or staying silent, he did the one thing that guaranteed maximum attention. He publicly rejected the story with a single word. Lies. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That wasn't a difference of opinion. That was a direct challenge to the credibility of the narrative itself. Deion wasn't arguing about how much credit Stefanski deserved. He was rejecting the premise entirely. And when a father with his experience says something that bluntly, it suggests he's seen enough to know the truth doesn't match the headlines. What made it even more uncomfortable was who the report came from. This wasn't a random blogger or a faceless account chasing clicks. This was a respected Browns insider, someone with real access, real sources, and real influence over public perception. Which raised an even bigger question. If the story wasn't accurate, then why was it being pushed so confidently? That's where the tension really started. Because if Shedeur wasn't actually getting those reps, those chances, that trust, then the narrative wasn't just wrong. It was covering for something else. And Deion knew how that game works. He's been on every side of football. Player, coach, recruiter, media figure. He understands how organizations manage optics, how stories are planted to protect leadership, how development narratives are used to explain away decisions that don't add up on the field. So when he saw his son being credited to a system that hadn't fully embraced him, he shut it down immediately. No clarification, no softening the blow. Just a line in the sand. And that's when people started paying closer attention. Because fathers don't usually go public unless they feel boxed in. And legends don't risk credibility unless they're confident they can stand on the truth. Deion knew his words would ignite debate, and he said them anyway. Which made it clear this wasn't about one article. This was about control of the story. And once Deion stepped in, it stopped being the Browns' story to tell. If Deion Sanders' response cracked the surface, Emmitt Smith's words drove straight through it. Because this wasn't a former player chasing attention. This was the NFL's all-time leading rusher, a Hall of Famer whose reputation is built on discipline, accountability, and respect for coaching. Emmitt Smith doesn't fire off emotional takes. When he speaks publicly, especially about coaching, it usually means something has crossed a line. And this time it had. Smith took to social media and delivered a message that felt measured at first, almost instructional. He talked about what great coaches do, how they put players in positions to succeed, how they remove obstacles instead of creating them. It sounded like a general football principle. Until it was. Because then came the turn. Smith accused Kevin Stefanski of doing the opposite, not because of scheme, not because of circumstance, but because of ego and pride. That choice of words changed everything. This wasn't about a bad call or a tough loss. It was an accusation of intent. A Hall of Famer publicly suggesting a coach was letting personal feelings interfere with a quarterback's success is about as serious as it gets without naming names in a press conference. And the league noticed. Fans immediately understood the weight of it. Emmitt Smith has no reason to protect Deion Sanders' son. He's not part of the Browns. He gains nothing by stepping into this conversation, which made his involvement impossible to dismiss as bias or noise. It also connected dots people had been circling for weeks. The sudden quarterback pulls. The inconsistent usage near the goal line. The refusal to fully commit, even when the results were there. Smith didn't accuse Stefanski of incompetence. He accused him of something far worse, self-sabotage driven by pride. That's a dangerous label for any coach, let alone one with multiple Coach of the Year awards, because it reframes every decision. Once ego enters the conversation, fans stop asking if a play failed, they ask why it was called in the first place. And from that moment on, every move Stefanski made came under a different kind of scrutiny. What made Smith's words even heavier was his relationship with Deion. These aren't casual acquaintances. They're peers who have shared locker rooms, locker room politics, and decades of NFL history. If Emmett felt comfortable going public, it suggested private conversations had already happened and weren't resolved. That's when this stopped being just a Browns issue. Because when Hall of Famers begin aligning publicly, it signals something deeper than disagreement. It signals a belief that the situation has crossed into territory that can't be fixed quietly. And with that accusation hanging in the air, the conversation shifted from development to motive. And once people start questioning motive, the next thing they look for is proof. That's when the rumors began to feel a lot more believable. Not long after Emmett Smith's comments hit, a story began circulating that felt almost too specific to ignore. According to unverified reports making the rounds in NFL circles, Kevin Stefanski reached out to Deion Sanders after the San Francisco game. The alleged goal wasn't football strategy. It wasn't damage control through the media. It was a dinner invitation, a private meeting, an attempt to smooth things over face-to-face. And according to the same claims, Deion said no. To be clear, this story has never been officially confirmed. No team statement, no direct quote, no verified source put their name on it, but that didn't slow it down. If anything, the lack of confirmation made it spread faster. Because it fit. Fans had already been questioning the relationship. Analysts were already debating trust. Deion's public lies comment had already signaled that something behind the scenes wasn't right. So when this rumor surfaced, people didn't treat it as random gossip. They treated it like the missing puzzle piece. The alleged reason behind the refusal made it even more explosive. Reports claim Deion believed Stefanski had spent months undermining his son's development, that he wasn't interested in breaking bread with someone he felt had already made up his mind. Again, this remains speculation. But the story didn't gain traction because it was dramatic. It gained traction because it mirrored what fans thought they were watching on Sundays. And that's the dangerous part. Once a rumor aligns with observable behavior, it stops sounding like fiction. Every decision gets reinterpreted. Every snap gets replayed with a new lens. Even silence becomes evidence. Whether the dinner invite actually happened almost stopped mattering. Because the reaction to the rumor revealed how fractured trust already was. Then Deion posted something that shifted the tone completely. It wasn't addressed to Stefanski. It wasn't addressed to the Browns. It wasn't even explicitly about football. But the timing made it impossible to separate. A message about belief, about recognizing who people really are when pressure reveals them, about discomfort now being better than regret later. It read like a father speaking to his son. But it landed like a verdict. To fans, it felt like Deion wasn't just reacting to one call or one article. He was responding to a pattern, a buildup. Months of watching something he didn't agree with and finally deciding he'd seen enough. And that's why the dinner rumor stuck. Not because anyone could prove it, but because, by that point, people believed the relationship was already beyond repair. A meal wouldn't fix it. A conversation wouldn't reset it. Whatever trust once existed had eroded quietly long before it spilled into public view. From that moment on, everything felt different. Because if there was no private path forward, then the next battle would happen in full view of everyone. And that meant the next game wasn't just another game. It was a test. By the time Tennessee came to town, the tension wasn't theoretical anymore. It was waiting for a moment to expose itself. And Shedeur Sanders gave that moment a stage. From the opening drive, he didn't look like a rookie trying to survive. He looked like a quarterback in control. Confident reads, tight throws, calm footwork under pressure. This wasn't a player being eased into the league, this was someone taking command of it. By the end of the night, the numbers told a story Cleveland fans hadn't seen in decades. Over 360 passing yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, 1 on the ground, fourth-quarter drives that shook the stadium. He didn't just keep up with Tennessee, he outplayed them, including the quarterback taken at the top of the draft. For 3.5 quarters, everything people doubted about Shedeur disappeared. Then the moment arrived. Cleveland trailed by 2, just over a minute left. Shedeur delivered again, firing a precise touchdown to pull the Browns within reach. The building was alive. Momentum was real. This was the exact scenario coaches dream about. Your quarterback is hot, the defense is reeling, and one play sends the game to overtime. And then he walked off the field. No injury, no visible issue, no explanation given. Kevin Stefanski sent in a wildcat formation. Rookie running back Quinn Judkins took the snap. The pitch never came. The pass fluttered and fell incomplete. Just like that, the game ended. The reaction was immediate. Social media exploded before the broadcast even cut to commercial. Fans weren't confused. They were stunned. Analysts didn't debate the execution. They questioned the decision itself. Shannon Sharpe said the Browns' habit of pulling Shedeur in goal-to-go situations needed to be studied. Skip Bayless went further, accusing Stefanski of blowing the game because he couldn't stand the idea of Shedeur tying it with his own hands. The harshest words came the next morning. Cam Newton called the decision extremely embarrassing on national television. He said it wasn't just a bad call. It was the kind of moment that costs coaches locker rooms. And through all of it, Shedeur said nothing. At the podium, he took the safe route, said sometimes you run the ball, gave his coach grace. Whether that was genuine belief or survival instinct didn't matter. What mattered was the contrast. The rookie absorbed it quietly. His father didn't. Because for Deion, that wasn't just a play call. It was a message, a decision made at the one moment that would have defined Shedeur nationally, and it was taken out of his hands. And that's when everything broke. Because once a player proves he can deliver, and the opportunity is still taken away, the conversation stops being about trust. It becomes about control. And suddenly, the questions people whispered before had a very loud answer. The Tennessee decision didn't feel shocking on its own. It felt shocking because it confirmed something fans had been sensing all along. That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It was the latest chapter in a development plan that, for Shedeur Sanders, never really existed. When the Browns drafted 2 quarterbacks in the same class, the message was clear on paper. Competition, depth, options for the future. Dillon Gabriel came off the board in the 3rd round. Shedeur followed 2 rounds later. From that point forward, the organization's choices told the real story. Training camp made it obvious. Gabriel received the first-team reps. He worked with the starting receivers. He ran the offense the coaches planned to use on Sundays. Shedeur watched. He ran scout looks. He threw to backups. Weeks went by without him taking a meaningful snap with the players he'd be expected to lead if his number was ever called. That matters more than fans realize. Quarterback isn't plug-and-play. Timing, trust, communication. Those things don't magically appear on game day. They're built through repetition, and Shedeur wasn't given that foundation. Kevin Stefanski later confirmed it himself. The first time Shedeur worked extensively with the starters wasn't during practice. It was during an actual NFL game. That game was Baltimore. Thrown into a live situation with no runway, no chemistry, and no margin for error, Shedeur struggled. The stat line was ugly. The reaction was brutal. Critics didn't hesitate to label him unprepared. But preparation requires opportunity, and opportunity was exactly what he hadn't been given. He was fighting blindfolded. And the organization watched it happen. Then something changed. Against Las Vegas, Shedeur got his first start. The game wasn't perfect, but it was controlled. Against San Francisco, he flashed poise despite the loss. The reads were faster. The pocket presence improved. The growth was visible week to week, even if the win column didn't reflect it yet. By the time Tennessee arrived, the gap was undeniable. Shedeur wasn't surviving anymore. He was producing. Which made the continued hesitation harder to explain. Even after delivering one of the best rookie performances in franchise history, the trust still wasn't there when it mattered most. The The same coach who supposedly spent hours developing him couldn't let him finish the job. That contradiction is where the narrative falls apart. Because development isn't just film study, it's belief. It's allowing a player to fail forward. It's trusting growth when it shows itself under pressure. Shedeur finally had momentum, real momentum, and the system pulled away. That's why Deion's response hit so hard. Not because he was defending his son's ego, but because he recognized a pattern he's seen before. A player being evaluated without ever being fully equipped to succeed. And once fans started tracing the timeline, it became impossible to ignore. This wasn't mismanagement. It was a philosophy. And that philosophy was about to be tested in ways Cleveland couldn't avoid. Once the emotions settled from Tennessee, a different conversation began quietly forming in NFL media circles. It wasn't loud. It wasn't official, but it kept coming up in side comments, podcast segments, and analyst roundtables. The theory was simple and uncomfortable. What if the Browns were never planning to build around Shedeur Sanders at all? Some analysts believe Cleveland's approach makes more sense when viewed through that lens. Not as confusion, not as indecision, but as intention. The idea is that Shedeur isn't being groomed as the future, he's being showcased. Todd McShay said it plainly. He suggested the organization never fully committed to Sanders and that his recent playing time could be about putting him on display for the other 31 teams. Let him flash. Let him boost his value. Let someone else believe. To be clear, this remains speculation. No executive has confirmed it. No trade talks have been publicly acknowledged. But the theory gained traction because it explains the contradictions that otherwise don't add up. Why limit first-team reps if you're developing a quarterback? Why hesitate in defining moments after breakthrough performances? Why publicly praise development while privately withholding trust? Viewed through a showcase lens, it starts to make sense. This also circles back to the draft night whispers that never really went away. Multiple reports over the years have claimed some teams were wary of drafting Shedeur because of his last name. Not because of talent, but because of fear. Fear that Deion Sanders would eventually want a voice inside the building. Fear that drafting the son meant inheriting the father. Whether that concern was fair or not, it followed Shedeur all the way to the 5th round. Now, with Deion increasingly visible around the Browns, seen speaking with owner Jimmy Haslam before kickoff, commanding attention the moment he entered the stadium, those old anxieties resurfaced. Fans online noticed it immediately. The body language, the respect, the way the energy shifted. And once those perceptions exist, organizations tend to retreat instead of engage. There's also the future to consider. Early mock drafts already have Cleveland linked to quarterbacks in 2026. That alone doesn't doom Shedeur. Teams plan ahead. But it reinforces the sense that he's being evaluated as a short-term solution rather than a cornerstone. Even Shedeur seems aware of it. When asked about his future, he didn't speak with certainty. He spoke with caution. He said he hopes to be around next year, then added the part that mattered. He has to make sure he's around too. That's not confidence, that's awareness. He knows he's playing under a microscope, not just to win games, but to prove his value beyond Cleveland. Every snap could be for his next opportunity, not his current one. If this theory is true, and again, it remains unproven, then the tension suddenly makes sense. The resistance, the mixed messaging, the unwillingness to hand him the keys. Because you don't fully commit to someone, you don't plan to keep. And if that's the case, then the final stretch of the season isn't just an audition. It's an exit strategy. With the noise at its loudest, Kevin Stefanski finally made it official. Shedeur Sanders would start the remaining games. On the surface, it sounded like clarity, confidence, commitment, but in reality, it felt more like a countdown, because when trust is genuine, it doesn't need an announcement. And when it comes this late, every decision that follows carries extra weight. 4 games remained. Chicago, Houston, Baltimore, Cincinnati. 4 defenses, 4 very different tests, and 4 chances for everything to either stabilize or completely unravel. From this point forward, nothing would be brushed off as experimentation. Every wildcat look would be questioned. Every conservative call would be dissected. Every moment Shedeur wasn't allowed to finish a drive would be read as intentional. The margin for interpretation disappeared. This wasn't just a quarterback evaluation anymore. It was a power struggle. On one side stood a coach with credentials, 2 Coach of the Year awards, full organizational backing, a system built in his image. On the other stood a rookie quarterback playing with nothing to lose and a father whose presence alone reshaped the conversation. And that presence mattered. Deion Sanders didn't need to say anything else. He'd already said enough. Every camera shot of him in the building carried meaning. Every handshake with ownership sparked speculation. Fans watched body language the way they once watched play design. And inside the locker room, players noticed too. Quarterbacks feel when belief is conditional. They feel when success is tolerated instead of embraced. And teammates feel it even faster. They see who gets second chances. They see who earns trust when the moment demands it. That's why the stakes were bigger than wins and losses. If Shedeur delivered again and still wasn't empowered, the narrative would turn toxic. If he struggled, critics would say the opportunity proved he wasn't ready. Either way, the evaluation wouldn't be fair because the context had already been poisoned. And then there was the fan base. Browns fans didn't agree on much, but they agreed on one thing: something felt off. Some demanded accountability from Stefanski. Others defended process over emotion. But the loudest voices weren't asking for patience anymore. They were asking for honesty. Because the Browns have lived this story before. Promising quarterbacks, mixed messaging, coaching indecision, development that never fully materializes, a cycle that resets every few years with a new name and the same frustration. Shedeur Sanders was now standing in the middle of it. 4 games to prove he belongs. 4 games to force clarity. 4 games where every snap doubles as evidence in an argument much bigger than football. Deion said it best without nomming anyone. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. The Browns were about to show everyone exactly who they were. And no matter how this ended, there would be no pretending after that. By the end of this, the Browns won't be able to hide behind explanations anymore. Not behind development timelines. Not behind game plans. Not behind carefully worded press conferences. Because the story was never about one tweet or one play call. It was about patterns. And patterns are what reveal the truth when words stop working. Deion Sanders understood that before anyone else said it out loud. When he wrote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them," it wasn't a slogan. It was a warning. A reminder that behavior, repeated under pressure, is more honest than any narrative pushed through the media. Kevin Stefanski showed who he was in the moments that mattered most. Not when the outcome was safe. Not when the decision could be justified later. But when the game, the crowd, and the spotlight demanded trust. And that's why this debate won't go away quietly. Because Cleveland doesn't just have a quarterback question. It has an identity problem. An organization still caught between control and conviction. Between protecting systems and empowering players. Between fearing influence and embracing talent. Shedeur Sanders didn't ask for any of this. He showed up, did the work, absorbed the criticism, and delivered when the opportunity finally came. He broke franchise droughts. He put his name next to history, and still, the leash never fully loosened. That tells you everything. Browns fans are already choosing sides because they've seen this movie before. A young quarterback flashes hope. The structure around him hesitates. Momentum stalls. And eventually, the blame gets passed until everyone is gone and nothing has changed. The only difference this time is the spotlight. This time, Hall of Famers are watching. Media voices aren't whispering. And a father with nothing left to prove refuses to let the story be rewritten without a fight. Whether Shedeur becomes Cleveland's future or its latest what if remains undecided. But one thing is already clear. The organization has revealed its instincts when control is challenged. And instincts don't lie. The drama isn't slowing down. It's reaching its breaking point. Every snap from here on out will echo far beyond the field. Careers will be shaped, reputations will stick, and excuses will expire. Because once someone shows you who they are, there's only one thing left to do. Believe them.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.